My boss ignored my ideas, so I sold them to a competitor. Let's stick to the plan, okay? That's what my boss, Lauren, told me. Right before she trashed the strategy I'd spent 6 months building. The strategy one knew could save our struggling department. The strategy that, if I'm being honest, would have made her look like a genius. If only she'd listened. But Lauren didn't listen. She never listened. Not to me. Not to anyone who didn't already have a fancy title or an office with a window. Ideas from people like me? Disposable. Forgettable. Dismissed with a smile that felt more like a slap. Cute idea, but not quite what we're looking for. So I stopped talking. Stopped offering. Stopped trying to prove myself to someone who didn't want to see me. And quietly, I started building something else. Something better. Somewhere else. Turns out, my ideas were valuable. Just not to Lauren, but to her biggest competitor? The one she loved to trash in every meeting? They were worth everything. And when I sold them, clean, legal, perfectly executed, Lauren didn't just lose a strategy. She lost clients, revenue, reputation. Because the thing about people like her? They never notice quiet employees. Until we're gone. And by then, it's already too late. My name is Layla, and for the longest time, I really believed hard work spoke for itself. When I landed a strategist role at one of the more competitive marketing agencies in the city, I thought I'd finally found a place I could grow. I was young, eager, and ready to prove myself. I stayed late without being asked. I volunteered for the difficult projects. I took on work that wasn't technically mine because I wanted to be the kind of employee people could rely on. And for a while, I thought that was enough. But working under Lauren? That changed everything I thought I knew about how success worked. Lauren wasn't the worst boss in the world, at least not in the way bad bosses usually show up. She didn't yell. She didn't micromanage every second of my day. If anything, she barely noticed me at all unless she needed something. That was the real problem. Lauren had this way of making you feel like your ideas were only valuable if they came out of her mouth. It didn't matter how hard I worked on a campaign, how much research I brought to the table, or how well a client responded to one of my ideas. If Lauren didn't present it, it didn't count. And if I did try to speak up in meetings, she'd give me that tight, polished smile, the kind that didn't quite reach her eyes, and steer the conversation right back to whatever idea she had already decided on. That's interesting, Layla, but let's stick to the plan. It didn't take long before I realized the plan was whatever kept her name on top. I told myself for a long time that maybe I just needed to wait my turn, that if I kept proving myself, eventually someone would notice. But months turned into years, and what I was really starting to notice was that people like Lauren never made room for people like me. Not because I wasn't talented, not because I wasn't ready, but because keeping me small made her feel bigger. And I had finally reached the place where I was done playing small. Before things went sideways with Lauren, I really did love my job. There was something about marketing that just made sense to me. It wasn't just about selling things, it was about solving problems. It was about understanding people, figuring out what mattered to them, and creating something that made them feel seen. I loved that part. I loved working with clients, learning their businesses like they were puzzles waiting to be solved. I loved being able to look at a messy situation and find clarity where nobody else could. For a while, I felt like maybe I'd found my place. Even working under Lauren wasn't terrible at first. She left me alone for the most part. I wasn't on her radar enough to threaten her. And honestly, I was fine with that. I got to do good work quietly. And the clients? They noticed. It's funny. In this industry, clients can always tell who's really doing the work and who's just showing up for the credit. They'd call me directly when things were falling apart. They'd pull me aside after meetings to thank me for being the only one who actually listened. One client even told me, "You're the only reason we're still with this agency." At the time, I thought it was just a compliment. Now, looking back, it was a warning I didn't see coming. There was one project in particular, a huge campaign for a longtime client, where I really thought Lauren might finally see me. I'd stayed up late for weeks crafting this strategy. Something fresh, something bold, something that could genuinely change our results. I poured everything I had into that presentation. When I sent it over to Lauren, I was nervous, but also proud. This was good work. This was smart work. And I genuinely thought, this is the thing that's going to show her what I'm capable of. Instead, she barely glanced at it. She skimmed a few slides, set it aside, and said the words I'd come to absolutely hate. Cute idea, Layla. But let's stick to the plan. That was the moment I knew. Lauren wasn't interested in new ideas. She was only interested in control, and I had officially outgrown every small little box she kept trying to shove me into. Looking back, I can't even say there was one big moment where Lauren turned into the villain of my story. It was quieter than that. Smaller things, adding up like dust in the corners. Things you don't always notice when you're busy working. Until one day you look around and realize you've been living in a mess for months. The first real red flag showed up in the meetings. I used to get invited to client calls all the time, especially if I'd built the strategy they were paying for. It made sense. I knew the work inside and out. But after I pitched that new campaign, the one she called cute, I noticed my invites started disappearing. Little by little, calls that used to automatically include me were suddenly marked as internal. Meetings I'd usually lead were suddenly being handled by Lauren or one of her new favorite hires. Someone louder, flashier, but with none of the background knowledge. At first, I told myself it was coincidence. Maybe she was just trying to streamline things. Maybe I was overthinking. But then came the second red flag. Projects I'd been working on for weeks, sometimes months, started getting reassigned. No explanation. No feedback. Just quietly handed off to someone else. And when I asked about it, Lauren would flash that perfect, patronizing smile and say something like, "I just want you focused on what you're best at." Translation? Stay small. But the moment that sealed it for me was the staff meeting where Lauren stood in front of the entire team, with my campaign strategy printed out in her hands, and pitched it like it was hers. Slide for slide. Word for word. Every late night. Every idea I'd carefully crafted. There it was. Presented like it fell out of the sky and into her lap. No mention of me. No credit. Not even eye contact in my direction. I sat there in that room, watching people nod along impressed, and I felt this strange mix of anger and clarity. Lauren didn't just want my ideas. She wanted them without me attached to them. And that was never going to work long term. Not for me. Not anymore. Never again. After that meeting, I stopped trying to prove myself to Lauren. I didn't argue. I didn't ask for credit. I didn't send another carefully worded follow-up email trying to advocate for my work. It was pointless. She'd already decided I was more valuable invisible. Fine. I could do invisible. But not the way she thought. For the next few weeks, I did exactly what she wanted. I stayed quiet. I let her present my ideas like they were hers. I nodded in meetings. I answered emails. I smiled at clients. But underneath all of that, I was building my exit plan. Because the one thing Lauren didn't realize? Clients talk. People notice. Especially when the person who always handled their projects, the one who actually knew their business, suddenly disappears without warning. It started with small things. A client copied me on an email to Lauren that said, "Hey, is Layla still on this project? Just checking. We really appreciated working with her." Lauren ignored it. Of course she did. But the client didn't. 2 days later, I got a LinkedIn message from that same client. Friendly. Casual. But the subtext was loud and clear. "Hope you're doing well, Layla. If you ever go out on your own, keep us in mind." That was the moment everything shifted for me. If Lauren didn't want my ideas? Cool. I'd take them somewhere else. Somewhere I was actually valued. And if her competitors, the firms she loved to trash in meetings, wanted fresh strategy? Wanted results? Wanted someone who could deliver without the politics? Then maybe my next move wasn't just about leaving. Maybe it was about building something better without her. Lauren thought she was silencing me. But all she'd really done was free me. And I was about to turn that freedom into the quietest and most expensive lesson of her career. Once I made the decision to leave, everything about how I moved changed. I didn't rush. I didn't broadcast my plans. Honestly, I didn't tell a soul. Because people like Lauren, they pay attention when you start acting different. They notice when your energy shifts, when you suddenly have boundaries, when you stop chasing approval. I stayed steady, professional, predictable. But behind the scenes, I was building something of my own. The first thing I did was get real clear about what I was worth. Not just in terms of salary, but value. Clients liked working with me not because I had some fancy title, but because I listened. I cared. I made their lives easier without making them feel like an afterthought. That wasn't something Lauren could replicate. That was mine. I started reaching out quietly to a few people I trusted, former colleagues, industry friends, a client contact or two who'd casually dropped hints like, "If you ever leave, let us know." And the response I got? Immediate, warm, direct. "Whatever you're thinking, Layla, we'd love to work with you. It wasn't desperation. It wasn't scheming. It was relationships. Built slowly. Built honestly. Built to last. The second thing I did: research. I looked at the competitor agencies Lauren loved to tear apart in meetings. She always made them sound incompetent, small. But when I dug into their client work, their reputation, their leadership teams, they weren't small. They were smart. And most importantly, they valued strategy. Real strategy. Not politics. Not ego. Actual results. So while Lauren was busy locking me out of meetings and presenting my work as her own, I was quietly preparing to leave her with nothing but empty PowerPoint slides. Because the thing about people like Lauren, they think control comes from titles, from having their name at the top of an org chart. But real control, real power, comes from people trusting you enough to follow you anywhere. And soon, that's exactly what was about to happen. When I finally gave my notice, I wasn't nervous. I wasn't angry either. If anything, I felt peaceful. Clear. Because I wasn't walking away from my job in defeat. I was walking away because I had already outgrown every part of it. Especially Lauren. I scheduled a short meeting on a Tuesday morning. Nothing dramatic, nothing with a big bold subject line. Just a quiet little calendar invite labeled, "Quick Chat." She showed up late. Of course she did. Sat down across from me like I was about to ask for a schedule change or a raise she had no intention of approving. "What's up, Layla?" I smiled. "I've accepted another opportunity. My last day will be in 2 weeks." Simple. Calm. Final. For a few seconds, she didn't say anything. I could see the wheels turning in her head, not because she was going to ask how she could keep me, but because people like Lauren only think about one thing: control. Losing it. She cleared her throat, trying to recover. "Oh, wow. I didn't realize you were looking." Translation: I didn't realize you were brave enough to leave. The conversation after that was forgettable. She asked where I was going. I gave her a vague, professional answer. Nothing personal. Nothing messy. She asked what they could do to retain talent like me. I almost laughed. Talent like me? She had me sitting right here for 3 years. She just never saw me. But the real beauty of that day, it came after. After word got out. After clients started emailing me directly. Not for gossip. Not for drama. But to say one very clear thing. "Wherever you go next, Layla, let us know." Because they weren't staying for Lauren's name. They were staying for mine. And now, I was leaving. And I would be taking everything that actually mattered with me. Leaving that company felt less like walking away from a job and more like quietly closing the door on an entire version of myself I had outgrown. And the fallout? It didn't take long. Not because I announced it publicly. Not because I trashed Lauren or exposed anything. But because when someone like me leaves quietly, the silence says everything. The first sign came 2 days after I submitted my notice. A client I'd worked with for years, someone I'd helped through crisis after crisis, sent me a message. Simple. Warm. "Congratulations on your next chapter. Please keep us in the loop. We'd love to stay connected." Translation: they weren't planning on sticking around either. Then another client reached out. And another. People I hadn't even expected. Clients I thought might just stay because that's what companies do. They stick with who they know. But the thing about relationships? Real ones. They aren't built on logos. They aren't built on titles. They're built on trust. And trust doesn't transfer just because someone new takes over an account. Lauren didn't understand that, which became painfully obvious when she started sending out transition emails that read more like panic than professionalism. "We're so excited to introduce your new account manager." Except clients weren't excited. They were cautious. Quiet. Some didn't respond at all. Some waited a few days and then emailed me directly. "Are you open to freelance work? Would love to stay in touch. Let us know where you land." Meanwhile, back at the agency, I heard from a friend that Lauren wasn't exactly handling things gracefully. Apparently, she was frustrated that clients were making things difficult. As if loyalty was supposed to stay tied to the company, not the person who had actually shown up for them day after day. That's when I realized something important. Lauren never lost me because I left. She lost me long before that. The minute she stopped listening. The minute she decided that keeping me small was more important than helping me grow. I wasn't the one scrambling now. I was busy building something better. And she was sitting in her glass office, wondering why nobody was answering her calls. Leaving that agency wasn't the end of my story. It was the beginning of something I should have done a long time ago. Freedom. Control. Work that actually respected what I brought to the table. I didn't leave to prove a point to Lauren. She wasn't my audience anymore. The truth is, once I walked out of that building, I barely thought about her at all. I was too busy. Busy saying yes to projects that aligned with me. Busy saying no to things that didn't. Busy working with people who valued collaboration, not control. And while I was building, Lauren was unraveling. Quietly. Predictably. I started getting messages from former coworkers. Little updates here and there. Nothing dramatic. Just those casual texts that said everything without really saying it. Another client left today. Lauren's losing it. That pitch you built last year? Yeah, they tried to run it without you. It flopped. She's blaming turnover, but we all know what really happened. Meanwhile, I was working with that same competitor Lauren used to mock in meetings. The one she swore could never touch our client list. Funny how quickly things change when you stop talking down about people and actually start doing the work. That competitor? They didn't care that I didn't have some fancy executive title. They cared that I could deliver, that I understood strategy, that clients trusted me enough to follow me out the door. I didn't post about it online, didn't brag, didn't subtweet. I just kept showing up, kept doing good work, kept letting results speak for themselves. Lauren once told me, in this industry, perception is everything. She wasn't wrong, but what she never understood is that perception without proof doesn't last. And me, I didn't need perception. I had relationships, real ones, and that's something no title, no matter how shiny, can ever replace. The real execution didn't happen the day I quit. It happened every single day after, when Lauren kept realizing what she had lost. Not just me, not just my ideas, but everything that came with me. Relationships, trust, stability. The thing about working quietly behind the scenes is that most people don't notice how much you're holding together until you're not there to do it anymore. That's what started happening. Slowly at first. Clients started pulling their contracts. Some went to competitors. Some followed me directly. And others? Well, they just stopped renewing. I wasn't even trying to take anyone. That was never my plan. But good work leaves a trail. Respect leaves a trail. And people remember who actually showed up for them when things were hard. Lauren thought she was untouchable because she was loud. But clients didn't want loud. They wanted results. They wanted someone who listened. They wanted someone who didn't treat their business like a stepping stone for personal glory. And that had always been me. I built my client base slowly, deliberately. No big announcements. No dramatic posts about leaving. Just one conversation at a time. One connection at a time. And in that quiet space, my career started to feel bigger than it ever had inside that agency. Meanwhile, Lauren, she tried to recover, hired new strategists, threw together fresh ideas that were just tired versions of things I'd pitched a year ago. But the problem wasn't the ideas. The problem was always her. Because ideas are easy to copy. Trust isn't. That's what she never understood. People don't stay for PowerPoints. They stay for people. And once you lose their trust, you lose everything. I didn't have to slam a door behind me when I left. It closed just fine on its own. And on the other side was a career built exactly the way I wanted. Without her. Without permission. Without limits. Just me. Finally doing the work I loved. For people who actually saw me. The thing about leaving a place like that? You expect to feel relief. But I didn't just feel relief. I felt like I could finally breathe. Really breathe. For the first time in years, I woke up without that tight feeling in my chest. No dread. No walking on eggshells. No rehearsing how to phrase things so Lauren wouldn't feel threatened. Just peace. Work was still busy, sometimes even busier than before, but it was mine. Mine to choose. Mine to shape. Mine to say yes or no without fear. And that was worth everything. Clients reached out regularly now, not because they had to, but because they wanted to. There was a kind of ease in our conversations I hadn't felt in years. No layers of approval. No corporate jargon. Just honest partnership. We're so glad we found a way to keep working with you, one client told me during a call. And I believed them. Because I felt it too. I built my little consulting business without fanfare. No big announcement posts. No dramatic, I left my toxic job captions. Just steady work. Solid relationships. Quiet wins stacking one after another. And Lauren, I heard things now and then. Nothing dramatic. Just small updates that told me everything I needed to know. Another client left. Another pitch fell apart. Another review that mentioned turnover and lack of strategic direction. I didn't feel angry when I heard those things. I didn't feel smug. If anything, I just felt done. Because when you finally step into a life that fits you, the mess you left behind doesn't feel heavy anymore. It feels distant, irrelevant. I didn't need to win loudly. I didn't need to prove anything. I was busy building a life where my work spoke for itself, where my ideas didn't have to be filtered through someone else's ego to matter, where I could show up fully, empathy and all, without apology. Lauren once told me I needed to learn how the industry really worked. Turns out, I did. I just learned it outside her walls. And that lesson paid better than any promotion she was never going to give me. Sometimes I wonder if Lauren ever realized what really happened. If she ever sat in that glossy conference room of hers, staring at another lost client report, and wondered how it all slipped away. Because from her perspective, it probably looked like I just left, like I moved on quietly. No drama, no fight. But what she didn't see was everything I took with me. Not paperwork, not files, not her precious presentations. What I took with me couldn't be boxed up or backed up on a server. I took trust. I took relationships. I took every ounce of value she never cared to notice. People like Lauren always think control comes from power, from titles, from sitting at the head of the table. But real control, real power, comes from the way people feel when they work with you. And you can't fake that. You can't steal it. You can't replace it with another loud voice in the room. She thought I was forgettable, replaceable, easy to silence. But me? I was never competing with her. I was never fighting for her approval. I was busy building something bigger, something better, something she could never touch. And every time I sit down to work, on my terms, in my space, with clients I respect, I'm reminded of exactly who won in the end. Because quiet exits sometimes make the loudest endings.
Thanks so much for watching. If you love a good revenge story, or if you've ever dreamed of getting the last word without saying much at all, you're in the right place. Be sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss a new savage ending. Because around here, karma always hits different.